Hello and welcome to the not quite post edition of Around the Desk with the Decision Desk HQ team. Still in Iowa limbo. I'm Drew McCoy, joined by Scott Tranter, Alex L. Dunstan. Is Dr. Podcool with us?
Dr. Podcool is not with us today because he's
Oh
working. He's
man.
working on the forecast model and a couple other things we're doing for New Hampshire. So,
All right. No,
yeah,
we'll let him get away with it this time then.
yeah, yeah.
So you guys, I wasn't on the stream last night, but you guys did a little vamping, I guess, huh?
6 hours of making shit up. At least I guess. Do we have the graphic? It is the political fire fest. It was. They promised all these great things. They promised it was all going to work, and all of a sudden,
It did
everyone
not.
shows up on the Iowa caucus night, and nothing is working. Literally,
And,
the
and
political fire fest.
and I think the most surprising part of it was that the Seltzer poll was right again.
That's hysteria, chaos, cats and dogs living together.
So
That's
Drew,
ridiculous.
Drew, you weren't on the stream because you were kind of in the middle of it. For everyone listening, you want to give the insider's take on like kind of what happened and how it went down and your opinion on, whether we're going to see results.
I mean, in the largest sense, nothing happened, right? They held a caucus and then there was nothing.
But like what
There's
went
a
wrong
couple,
with the caucus? What's the
yeah, there's
mechanics?
a couple of issues here. People are focusing on the technology, and there's conflicting reports about all of this, right? And a lot of it's anecdotal. The Iowa Democrats are scrambling; they haven't been terribly forthcoming publicly. It doesn't seem in their interactions with the campaigns, because of course those leaked, including transcripts and audio. That's any better privately. They're trying to figure out what happened. So there's basically two parts. What's going on? One is the caucus itself. They changed a lot of rules. This was the result of 2016 and the Sanders campaign and their push for inclusion and transparency. And it seemed people had a lot of trouble adapting to it. One of the issues has been, we talked a lot about the alignments. You go, you show up, you have the first alignment, then you have the second alignment. And in past years, if your group was viable, say you voted for Pete Buttigieg and in your precinct you were viable, in the past, other unviable groups, non-viable groups could poach and bring you over. This year you weren't. If you were in a viable group after the first alignment, you were there. You were locked in. You could hand in your voting card and go. What it turned out is a lot of people at the precinct captain level seem to, or precinct chair level, they call it, um, seem to be doing the old rules, which was you would just count heads again. But a lot of people left thinking they would count the cards that they turned in. And so there was discrepancies, people saying, no, the cards were just a backup. And it's like, no, the cards were the vote. So you had people who they're saying, some of this alignment stuff just wasn't done right, which corrupts the data. That's not a transmission problem. That's a you just conducted this incorrectly problem. Theoretically, you have these cards, you can go do it, but what happened to them? This is one thing. There was stories last night that they were going to precinct captains' houses at midnight, 2 a.m., saying, "Give us the cards, give us the vote tally sheets." Because people were. This is where the technology comes in. They were trying to report the numbers up the chain, and they couldn't. People gave up. They went home. Taking vote tally sheets and vote cards, that's suboptimal. So then you have the issue about this app, and there's a lot of talk about that. Some people said it worked fine for them. Other people said they couldn't even download it over the last couple of days. And basically, what happened, it seems, is a lot of people had trouble with the app or just didn't want to deal with technology. Maybe they're older. A lot of these people, more senior citizens get involved in volunteering to run this kind of thing. They had just decided, hey, we're just going to phone it in like we used to. Apparently, the Iowa Democrats did not plan on that. The phone was supposed to be a backup system. Suddenly, the majority of people are using the backup system, which it was not designed for, to handle that kind of traffic. It was supposed to be if, one or two people or 5% of people having trouble, not significant percentages of the people doing it. Also, it seemed like the regular helpline and the voting dial-in line were the same. So you had people saying, hey, I need help making this work, or I have a question about how to run the caucus. And they were competing with people trying to dial in votes. And the system just got overwhelmed. The Democratic Party is saying there was a problem in the coding. There's also the issue of they were expecting the precinct chairs to do the math. And Alex, you could talk about this. Some of that math is a little, it's basic, but kind of complicated because you're just dealing with ridiculous numbers. You have a large field. You're trying to determine viability, and then each precinct is assigned a state delegate equivalent. It could be like 0.36598, and you're trying to multiply it by all these different numbers. It was a lot for people to do. And so I think you had a technology problem, and you had a process problem, and then you had a disaster problem.
So, I mean, when you have a big event, right? Just even in your personal life, a wedding, for instance, you do a dress rehearsal, you do a practice. So, what happened here? Like, why wasn't all of this tested before?
Well, this is the problem: is you have 1,700 something precincts, right? So you have 1,700 precinct chairs. This again is kind of the homemade nature of a caucus. It's really a giant Elks Club, sort of electing the grand poobah for the chapter. These aren't people that are paid on staff. They're not people that are going to carve out a ton of time. It also was entirely foreseeable. When they tried to say they were going to put out 3 sets of numbers when they had only put out 1 set previously, or just the idea of using a phone app for the first time. The history of that's not great. There were stories when this first broke that they were going to be using the phone app probably about 2 months ago, that there were cybersecurity concerns. And my thought was, you're not even going to get to the cybersecurity. It's just not going to work. It was entirely foreseeable. I think everybody had the best of intentions. I don't think there's anything nefarious. I just think, you're trying to do too much on too limited a scope. Just political parties aren't meant to do this kind of thing. It's not supposed to be this big. And that's why this is probably the last Iowa caucus we're going to see.
Or, caucuses in general. I mean, we're kind of leading up to Nevada. Nevada, Twitter was ablaze about how the Nevada Democratic Party's potentially using the same app that Iowa is. I'm sure there's a reporter on the ground trying to figure out what that answer is.
Nevada has a bigger problem.
What's that?
I was on a call last week. It was a national call with media and reporting services like Decision Desk HQ, and they were telling us what they're going to report and how they're doing it. So they're actually going to report the same type of numbers. They use county delegates as opposed to state delegate equivalents. First expression, second expression. They're also going to talk about total turnout. But Nevada does something really weird. They do early voting in a caucus, which strikes me as a bit of an oxymoron. Because the caucus is supposed to be you show up at a certain time, and everybody votes, and then everybody leaves. But they're going to do 4 days. They start voting February 13th, next Thursday. And they do 4 days of this. But this is what they said on the phone call. If you vote early in Nevada, and it's usually in Vegas, Clark County, is obviously the epicenter of the state. So you go vote early. They're going to take all those things after the 4 days, and they're going to reapportion them back to your home precinct. So say you live in, I don't know, what's a suburb of Vegas? Henderson?
Henderson, yeah.
You live in Henderson, you work in Vegas, you go on your lunch hour, your caucus, next Thursday, next Friday. The state party's going to collect all that. They're going to look at where you live. Then they're going to transmit that back to your home precinct. Okay, so I see a problem right there.
So we actually have a little bit of breaking news on this front. We're going to get that on the screen in just a second. But the Nevada Democrats have just announced that they will be dumping the app and the vendor used in Iowa. They say that they are confident that what happened in Iowa will not happen in Nevada.
I'm sure it won't.
And that they had already developed a series of backups and redundant reporting systems.
Uh-huh.
So,
this is what happened for the GOP, right? Is Iowa crashed and burned, and then the Iowa GOP was like, "Oh, we're going to try something new."
Yeah, the RNC came in and basically ran the caucus for Nevada, which look, they'll have to figure it out. I think the biggest thing is, and can we switch over to the slide we got on these campaigns? Look, Nevada, as we've talked about, Iowa does not really matter from a delegate standpoint. It's a small amount of delegates. It's more about the momentum you get afterwards. And so if you look at what the campaigns did last night, I mean, Amy Klobuchar, the savviest politician, said, "Fuck it, we're gonna go out and just give a speech." and with whatever's left on TV, and then all the other candidates followed. You've got Bernie's camp, you got Pete's camp releasing numbers. If you scroll down a little bit on this, Austin, so we can actually see it. Bernie's saying, and zoom in a little bit, Bernie's saying with 40% of precincts in Iowa, this is how he sees it. And, shocking, he sees himself, I believe, in this one, the winner. Look, I don't think anyone's lying here, but with 40% of the precincts you're tracking, like, these campaigns are basically trying to create their own narratives. And I think, having been on one of these before, if you're a campaign, even if it's a disaster, you have a pretty good idea of how it ended up, because you've got field organizing things in place, so you can get an idea, not all the precincts, but at least enough of them, so you get a good idea of how it's going. It's pretty telling what Bernie's saying, what Pete's saying, what Amy's saying, and what Biden's telling everyone not to do.
Yeah, if you think you did well, you did not send your lawyer out within an hour last night to say this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And this is what's crazy to me, right? Like, about this caucus system at the moment, and what might be the final nail. At a time where, like, both sides of the political spectrum have very little confidence in our election system, Republicans, a lot of them, including the president, thinking that every illegal immigrant votes, and then on the Democratic side, thinking that every election is hacked by the Russians. You've got campaigns releasing clashing numbers and no official tally to sort of, check them against.
Well, and when the tally comes later this afternoon, there's going to be no one, they're going to be claiming it's bullshit.
Right,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
When Sanders released that was the end of sort of acceptable data from Iowa.
Yeah.
Because then it was you're just fighting over versions of reality. Even if one or the other is entirely true, that's just not relevant. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think after everything that's happened to this point, and all the narratives are out there, what we sort of think happened with Sanders maybe narrowly winning, Buttigieg doing a little better, maybe even winning state delegates, Warren sort of in the middle of nowhere in third, Biden doing worse than people expected in fourth, and Klobuchar claiming, sort of a close fifth.
Claiming the dark horse mantle, yeah.
Does anybody even really want real numbers to come out at this point? Is there any upside? I mean, it seems like they're all locked into their stories.
Well, we kind of want the numbers to come out because that's how we're going to do our model.
I get you want them.
But I say that flippantly, like, no, in reality, no one wants the numbers to come out. They're just like, we moved on. Yeah. I mean, look, unmitigated disaster is the only way I can describe last night. Unmitigated disaster. And it's the reason why I call it political firefest is we don't have the tweet here, but like, I think it was a Ruby Kramer tweet. She was like, Troy Price had campaigned. He became Iowa chair based on his promise that this was going to be a well-run process. Up until basically it was over, this guy was telling everyone it's going to be the greatest caucus ever. Everyone show up. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. He had to have known, like, you don't fail this bad and not know a week ago it's going to be a rough night. Like, you just can't, or you're delusional. You're absolutely delusional.
The first tell was when at 8 Eastern, they didn't have the satellite caucuses.
Yeah.
Like, I was expecting sort of be like Florida or an early vote state, right? Where it's just, okay, hey, these have been done for 2 hours, here you go.
Yeah.
And nothing. And they're like, ooh, that's no good.
Yeah. I think that just to close this out so we go to New Hampshire is, look, we discussed it before because, Drew, you were coordinating with the Iowa Dems, and, we have to work with them. We're members of the media, and we report this stuff out. But, I mean, we were commenting internally, like, this is going to be problems. Now, we didn't think it was going to be this bad, but we just knew there was going to be problems last night. And, this was on the edge of our confidence interval of how bad it was going to be. But we knew there was problems. And so, like, it's just, everyone, look, if you've been on a campaign, you don't go into an election night like this and not have dumpster fires to put out, but usually you find a way to figure it out. They just didn't find a way to figure it out last night. Yeah.
Real quick before we move on to New Hampshire, don't you think they're doubling down on their mistake by releasing a little over half of their results? Like, people are gonna then have a new narrative about those results, which could very well be very different than the final results.
Is that the story that they're talking about releasing half the
Yeah,
results?
yeah. At 4 p.m., what they're planning on doing is releasing about 50% of the precincts.
And you know what? None of those precincts are going to be the Yang precincts.
Yeah, at this point, honestly, if I was them, I'd just be like, "We'll let you know."
Yeah.
Because really, everything's moved on. State of the Union is 2 hours or what, 4 hours after this partial release. Maybe that's kind of what they're banking on. There's the impeachment vote tomorrow, and then you're into Thursday, and the circus has moved on to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, and that gets back to my question. It's like, who wants these numbers out? I mean, what are these numbers going to tell us at this point? I get you need it for the model. I got that. But other than that, it's just, you're right. Nobody's going to be like, oh, thank God. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because they're going to say, Bernie's going to be like, well, that's the 50% that wasn't part of my 40%.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I would be telling them too. You'd be like, which precincts, and bring up the talking points. It's absolutely crazy. Moving on to New Hampshire, which is less than a week away. Here's what the polling looks like going into it. I mean, Sanders has had the upward swing. These colors are horrible. We're going to have to switch this for next time. Sorry, guys. Klobuchar, a little bit of leveling off if you follow the trend. Warren, upward swing. Biden, downward swing. Buttigieg, real big downward swing. I mean, that's probably why Pete went out, even not knowing. It looks like he gave his pre-written I won Iowa speech, because he's got to blunt some of, he's got to know that he's going to have a rough night in New Hampshire if these trends hold. And look, having been on Rubio in 2016, like, Rubio was a solid second place, and then the debate happened and he was not in second place. We have a debate on Friday night, so I guess everything could change around. But like, narrative setting is in, polling's happening. This is New Hampshire's basically, let's just call it what it is. New Hampshire's basically going to be the first election contest of the 2020 presidential Democratic primary. Like, yeah. Iowa hasn't reported. It ain't real.
And nobody's going to accept it as real. Now, and that's the reality of this, right? Because Iowa's never about the delegates. It's about the storyline. It's the vaunted tickets out to New Hampshire that get you to go on.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. So the train's leaving. The station now is New Hampshire. It's not Iowa. It's not the starting point for the train. Which, I don't know. What do you guys think? It strikes me as this makes, and again, not because of delegates, just because of the crazy nature of this and not the thinning of the field and everything. I personally was on the, I think we're going to get an open convention. I think we're going to get an open convention really this time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it really just comes down to how many candidates are left on Super Tuesday when you have about a fourth of all of the delegates being allocated,
Like a Bloomberg.
Bloomberg's going to be in.
Yeah. How crazy is this for his campaign, right? Well, these guys have been scraping and scuttling for, 6 delegates here, 7 delegates there. Now they're just all covered in crap. And he's just spending $500 million in states that actually have delegates. It's slightly less crazy than it was yesterday.
Hey, maybe
maybe if Nevada screws up, it'll.
I was going to say, Austin's going to pull it up. We just got a tweet question to us on Twitter about how this all works. And so,
not well, apparently.
Yeah. Austin, if you can throw that up real quick. And we're getting a couple questions in chat on this. Kurt Woodward. Good time remember how it gets a breathtaking amount of vote tallying, reporting race calling done quicker, more accurately than any 1,000 people sitting with election officials using phones to report, usually paper tallies. Unsure how they do it. So we got a lot of respect for the Associated Press. We are a little faster than them, a lot faster in some cases. We do it roughly the same way. We have people in county elections offices. We have scrapers when they do it publicly, and where appropriate, we have relationships with county officials so we can get that information quickly. The AP does that. Edison does that. But at last night, the reason why it was so different, to answer Kurt's question, look, it's not. This is not a state-run operation. This is not a thing. This is roughly the same effect as a high school class president race. I mean, or an Elks Club, as Drew put it earlier. Like, these guys do their own thing, and they get to keep their own tally. They don't report it to elections officials or anything like that. They are the elections officials, and so we're at the mercy of what they report out. And that's why the AP has no numbers. That's why we have no numbers. That's why Edison has no numbers. There's a few things out there by local papers because they actually had, reporters who are good at their job in these various precincts and saw the results firsthand, and they reported it out, and good for them. But as far as the official results, that's why we don't have it, and that's how it works. That being said, since we're talking about New Hampshire's next week. New Hampshire is a primary. They have hundreds of townships. We have people on the ground who've done this before, who are trained to get the results. We'll have our system in place. We're looking forward to being the fastest in New Hampshire again, but that's the black and white difference between New Hampshire and Iowa in terms of how this works.
Yeah, and I would argue when talking about the phone system that the AP uses and has for years. Excuse me. Which works great and everything. It just has its limitations like anything else. Everything's a trade-off. There's a lot of focus on technology and how technology is bad, and people saying, phone is the greatest way to do this. And I'm not even talking about this gentleman. There was somebody else who was talking about that. And my counter argument was, what technology isn't bad. Immature, untested, untried technology is bad. When you have a system that you've used, that's been proven, that's been iterated, that you have, more importantly than anything else, training on. You can have the greatest technology in the world. It could be tested. It could be bulletproof. And if you don't teach people how to use it, it's going to suck. So technology shouldn't be taking the bullet here. It's how you use it. You can talk about technology. You want to say, oh, well, paper and pen is the way to go. You wouldn't run a newsroom that way, for example. You would go into a newsroom today and you'd see a lot of computers. You'd see tablets. You'd see all the modern conveniences. You wouldn't go say, hey, we should actually have IBM Selectrics because that'll be safer. That's just not the reality. You have to have things that are tested, that have been improved on, that have a baseline. And most importantly, as I just said, people know how to use it. It always comes down to people. And I think that gets back to the idea of why couldn't they do this? These are people that are showing up once, maybe for training or two, every 4 years, and it just overwhelmed them. And now we're seeing the fruits of that.
Just to put a pin in New Hampshire, we might wrap this one early just because we spent so much time on Iowa. Do we think the order of New Hampshire is going to be where this trend chart is right here, which basically has Sanders in the lead, Biden in second, Warren in third, Buttigieg in a fourth, and, Klobuchar in a distant fifth? Do we think this is how it's going to be, or do we think the order is going to switch up? And if we think the order is going to switch up, what do we think it's going to be? Starting with Alex, who may be on mute. All right, starting with Drew.
By default, I think we could pretty easily see Buttigieg eclipse Biden for second.
Really?
Yeah. If what people were talking about didn't happen in Iowa, there were a lot of places he wasn't viable.
But so he beats Biden. Does he beat Warren too? Does he come in a legit second, or does he beat Biden to come in third and Warren's in second?
I could see Buttigieg getting second. Warren, yeah, she's neighboring like Bernie is, but obviously that doesn't mean as much.
If Buttigieg comes in second to Sanders in New Hampshire, it's over for Biden. It's over. And because everyone's going to be like, everyone's going to say Buttigieg is basically the younger, hipper Biden at that point.
Yeah. The other thing that people haven't focused on very much, and understandably so, given what happened, is turnout in Iowa wasn't so high. It was, it wasn't 2008 record level when you had all these candidates. It was maybe approaching 2016 when you had Bernie and Hillary. So, I just don't think Biden's lighting up the world here, and Bernie's going to get his share. And if anybody's looking for the it factor and to be exciting and whatever, yeah, I think Buttigieg could. It's also a good spot for him, right? It's New England. He'll do well outside of Boston.
Yeah.
He probably won't do well in the more rural northern areas, and the college towns might sort of be up for grabs, but that's certainly Bernie land. Yeah. But you could see him doing well in the coastal areas. Buttigieg, yeah.
Look, I mean,
I think
go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
I think it's very dependent on what happens over the next 72 hours, you know? So they're gonna dump about half of the votes in. Obviously, whoever has a lead at that point will get somewhat of a boost over the next 24 hours, although muddled with the State of the Union stuff as well. Um, and then, you know, who is the eventual winner? And then the debate will also shake things up, or has the potential to shake things up like it did in 2016. So, you know, if Buttigieg really does win or comes very close to winning Iowa and has a good debate performance, you know, you could be seeing that scenario where he comes in second in New Hampshire, and then all of a sudden starts looking like a Bernie versus Buttigieg um, matchup with a wild card in the wings in Mike Bloomberg. Um,
Or
but
Tom Steyer in South Carolina. Polling shows him doing better there.
yeah,
Supposedly eating into, if anybody's eating into Biden's African American support, it's been Tom Steyer.
yeah, that's another wild card that I don't think a lot of people know what to make of.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy set of scenarios before Iowa imploded, and that obviously has not given us any greater clarity or visibility into how this is going to shake out. It's just going to be crazy. That said, fortunately though, there is a primary forecasting model to help us through the fog and the smoke of what is a burning dumpster fire at the moment.
And
So-
you can see that.
So, real quick,
for
let's
New-
just set the table on these forecasting models. So 538 said a few hours ago they were going to pause the update on their forecasting model because of the Iowa results. We here at Optimus also paused ours. Alex is going to go into it, but we're basically waiting for Iowa to result so we can actually redo some of the sims because Iowa is predictive of what's going to happen in the future. So we got to kind of know it.
What are you going to do with only 50% of the vote, though? How's that going to factor in?
Well, that's not a called race. I don't know. We got to talk about that. What do you think, Alex?
I think if all they're releasing is half, we're probably going to wait until a much more substantial percent of the vote is in, probably closer to 90% of the vote is in. These numbers, though, the New Hampshire forecasting numbers especially, you can see how close it is between Biden, Warren, and Buttigieg there for second place. So I think definitely what happens over the next 5 days is really going to shake up this race and sort of set it in motion for the rest of the time. You could have it whittle down to a 2-person race still, 3-person race by Super Tuesday. Or it could be, you know, like Iowa, where the top 4 candidates all survive and have reasons to keep going.
Yeah, no, I think, look, these models are interesting to look at. We really needed some races to happen so we could sharpen it a little bit. You know, 90% in Iowa is fine. Who knows when we're going to get to 90? Who knows whether, 50 is going to be believable or not? At this point, some of the most predictive things in the model is the polling. We're going to have some new polling come out probably in the next 72 hours. That's going to influence this model and some of the national stuff. Every minute that goes by, we don't have a result in Iowa makes it less relevant to this forecasting because so much. Iowa's not about a delegate play. Iowa's about a momentum play. Someone wins something in Iowa, someone loses something in Iowa, and then it affects the polling, which in turn affects the model. It's not about it's not like California where that matters. California matters because of how many delegates it has. Iowa matters not because of how many delegates it has. It matters because what it does to the public perception, and the public perception feeds into the polling. And I think that's the biggest problem with Iowa right now, and the fact that New Hampshire's so close to it, next to it. It's pretty crazy. Look. We'll have some updates. You'll see it on the site. You'll see it on Aussie, our partner over there, on it. But at this point, these forecast models are all going to be paused. as we wait for Iowa to do it. And, let's think about this 4 and 8 and 12 years ahead. Some of the biggest problems with making Democratic or Republican primary presidential models is we need previous elections to go off of. There's a huge asterisk next to Iowa now. Like, even if they come out with results 4 days later, there's a huge asterisk to it. Even a bigger asterisk than the Dem one from 4 years ago was. And so it's this kind of thing that's really going to screw up forecasting going forward, just because we have all these anomalies and all these edge cases that happen. I mean, it is an entirely huge edge case, the fact that Iowa may not have accurate results and may not report everything. I mean, you can't simulate around that. Alex had to jump off, but Drew, you and I are going to close this off with our favorite question. Who would you rather be right now? I'll go first. I think I'd rather be. I think I'd rather be Elizabeth Warren, mostly because I don't think she's going to do that bad in Iowa when all the numbers come down. And even if she does do that bad, I think she could figure it out in New Hampshire. But who knows? I don't know. I'm probably gonna regret I said that in a week from now. But that's my guess there. Where are you at, down?
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
He's got a. There's always something to be said about somebody who may have a lower ceiling, but certainly has a higher floor in a multi-candidate race.
Yeah.
And the field is shortened. The race is shortened. There's not going to be the winnowing. So it's not going to be a heads up and sort of a lane kind of thing. It's going to harden people who may have been looking for now we're going to go be safe and, we'll fall in line instead of fall in love. This is going to harden a lot of feelings. I think Bernie's in good shape.
Yeah. All right. So we got a question from the stream. What about Mike Bloomberg? If you're Mike Bloomberg right now, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking this crazy thing, it might work.
Yeah. I mean, look, the most realistic outcome. I mean, it was not a realistic outcome that he was going to get any votes last night in Iowa, so that's not a realistic outcome. The most realistic, best outcome from him is exactly what happened.
Yeah,
they did not report results.
And he's the adult in the room. He's unsullied by this. He's got the field to himself a little longer in these states. People are going to be scrambling for resources. Nobody's going to get a big fundraising bump, I don't think. Biden's in financial straits.
Yep.
He's a mid-pack candidate financially. And so there was talk that he was reallocating some advertising money to Iowa with the idea he would get a bump, and then he could get small donor money, because if his firewall is South Carolina, well, 3 days later is Super Tuesday. So it doesn't matter how much you raise that Monday. It's just not going to change anything.
Yeah.
So it hurts Biden, and anything I think that hurts Biden helps Bloomberg.
Yeah. Crazy. All right. So thanks for joining. Thanks for listening last night. We see a lot of the same people who were with us 5 hours last night as we were looking for something to talk about. Please subscribe on Twitch, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. We're going to be back. We'll release our stream schedule for the rest of the primary season here shortly. But definitely follow us on New Hampshire next Tuesday. It's shaping up to be a big pivotal night, and just like Decision Desk has done in the past, where we've led in terms of reporting and being the first.
Hey, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Breaking news: CNN says Biden campaign reportedly seeking court injunction to halt this afternoon's party release of Iowa results.
Who do you sue? I was just talking about that. Like, who do I understand they see, but like it's like the student class president suing over that. Like, there's no one to sue.
Do the party. You can sue anybody. It's America. Anyway, sorry to
no, that's worth it.
That's just insane.
Yeah. Anyway, subscribe to Twitter. As that some comes out, we'll add it, to the feed. Subscribe to us on Twitch. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Keep an eye on our results for next Tuesday in New Hampshire. We expect to be the fastest, most complete, and most accurate results. We're gonna have it first if Brandon's doing his job, and he is. He's been chugging away. So thanks for tuning in, and talk to everyone again soon.